of the links
Yeah.
going and out there so that the people can join us, Steve.
But
So
it's just a button on air or go live or whatever it says nowadays.
you are correct. It is a start broadcast button.
Whatever.
And it is very easy to do, Steve. You are correct.
Yeah. Oh, no, I won't go into that. Never mind.
Oh.
Oh no, you don't want me to go into that.
I don't want you to go into what, Steve?
No, that.
Oh.
Just trust me.
Oh. Okay. Anyway, are we ready to go, Steve?
I'm ready.
Okay. All right. This is the Fortean Slip, episode 61, Harold, the Haunted Doll. We are joined by Anthony. I hope I don't screw up your last name, Anthony. Quinata?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. And he is the current owner of Harold, the Haunted Doll. I did a story on this haunted object. Oh God, like I was saying before the show, it's like 3 or 4 years ago now. I want to say it was like more like 4 or 5, but my memory eludes me. But I became fascinated with the whole subject of haunted dolls. I did one on Robert, Harold, Annabelle, Poopa,
Frank.
Yeah, Frank, Bill. I went right down the line, Steve. And I happened to catch a post. I didn't realize that Anthony and I are actually friends on Facebook.
Well, Facebook friends, but not real friends.
Well, you know how it is. You get suggestions for friends.
That's right.
You don't know who they are. You're just, and when you're doing something like this show or the likes of, you're just trying to build an audience. You're just, adding people willy-nilly. So
I don't add people willy-nilly.
Not anymore, you don't.
No, not anymore.
Willie, but not Nilly.
That's right.
Willie, but not Willie.
Millie. Right. I add the Millie Vanilli.
That's right.
Everything that was the best joke ever on this show.
Everything Steve does is lip synced.
Yeah, it's all fake. Everything I've ever done.
Complete
fake news, right?
Fake news, yes. Steve is fake news. Steve is our newsman, Anthony. And he is completely full of fake news.
And inept at reading it. So
yes.
We don't even have any news tonight, do we?
No.
Yeah, fuck the news.
That's right. Tonight it's fuck the news. So Anthony, you and I spoke last night, and I gave you kind of the rundown of what we are as a show, who Steve and I, where we come from,
and you still came on.
Yes, he still came on, Steve.
I know, right?
And Anthony seems to be a good sport. I explained to him that we are an uncensored podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, so he is aware of that, and so I didn't get into too much of the information with you last night. However, I did about your ownership of the doll, and I was trying to find before the show. For some reason, I couldn't find it. The backstory on Harold.
What are you doing? Looking up Wikipedia again?
That's right, I am.
I'm sure that's correct.
That's right. That's right. You have a book, Anthony.
I do. It's called Harold the Haunted Doll.
Unique, good title, I guess.
That's right.
Yeah.
Directed to the point.
It fits the subject.
Originally, I was going to entitle it The Devil's Doll. And somebody mentioned that because it's known as Harold the Haunted Doll, that's probably what I should go with. And that's what I went with.
Now,
short, sweet, to the point.
Are you the actual author of that book, or did you?
I am.
That was written. Okay.
I am.
Now, when did you come in possession of Harold?
Pardon the pun, right?
Yes.
2000 April 2004. I wanted to write a book after I discovered that people were selling quote haunted objects on eBay, and the title of the book was going to be "Haunted eBay: Are You Going to Believe Me or Your Lying Eyes?" would be the subtitle. And I went on and I literally just started buying things and thought, well, we'll see where this goes, because I still am, after all these years, very skeptical, and I've been investigating the paranormal since the 80s. And I just
we have a regular Ghostbuster here tonight.
Yeah, well, just for the record, I honestly don't get involved with the paranormal very much at all anymore, simply because I think the whole field has just gone nuts.
Yeah, hey, you fit right into our show, man.
I mean, even with regards to this doll, to this day, I'm still skeptical. And that if anybody calls me or writes to me and makes a claim, I grill them. I mean, literally, will grill them. They ended up in the hospital. I want hospital reports or copies of it. So, anyway, like I said, I acquired him in April of 2004, and honest to goodness, I had no idea what I was getting into. I really didn't. So
you buy him off? Did you buy him off of eBay?
I did.
Okay, now wait. He went up for sale in 2003, correct?
2000. Yeah, actually, I think it was 2002 or late 2002, because the woman who had him before me, her name was Kathy, and she bought it knowing, because the listing that you had on the Fortean slip was actually a hoax listing. I mean, the guy who wrote the listing had the doll, but he didn't buy it in Webster, Florida. He actually bought it in New York, where he was living with his brother at the time. And, for the most part, actually, I would really say like 98, 99% of it was literal bullshit. And, he admits it. He admitted it then. He admits it now. But he also now thinks that something is going on with the doll. So, but the woman who had it before me, her name was Kathy, as I was saying, she had it for a year, and then she put it up for auction for a couple of reasons. I mean, I asked her at one point, why didn't you just throw it in the ocean? She said, I probably should have. But, she said, I wanted somebody who knew what they were doing to have it. And so, I saw it. It had a reserve on it. That's the only reason why I even bid on it, to be very honest with you. And I told her that. Because after I placed a bid, she wrote to me immediately and said, why do you want the doll? And I said, to be honest with you, I really don't. And I said, as soon as somebody outbids me, I'm out of here. And the bid that I put up was $300. I think she had it up for sale for $295, which is how much she paid for it a year before. Right. And somebody did outbid me, and he wrote to me and said, you might as well stop bidding because this doll is mine. And to be very honest with you, I had a real high testosterone level at that time. And I thought to myself, it may be yours, yes, OB, but it's going to cost you. And my plan was to dump the auction on him. And turned out he dumped the auction on me, and that's how I ended up. Yeah, I know. But what was interesting, Kathy said, I don't believe the doll is haunted. I do believe it's cursed. And I asked her why. We got into this ongoing dialogue, throughout the 2 weeks the doll was up for auction. And, now I don't believe it's haunted. I don't believe it's cursed. I believe it's something much worse than either of those.
Oh, boy. So that's back in the day when you could actually communicate with other bidders on eBay. You can't do that no more.
You can't. I haven't been on eBay probably since 2004.
It's probably a good thing with your willy-nilly spending habits there. Right? You'd be broke, man.
You'd wind up with all kinds of little magical haunted items. Our old co-host admitted on air that he once sold a ring with a magic genie in it. And he's like, yeah, I bought it at the store in one of those machines where you put a quarter in.
Our old co-host Matt Knapp, he made a pretty decent living selling haunted items on eBay at one time.
I'll bet.
And it was probably around the same time.
My idea was just to buy a bunch of items, run some quote test on them, and then just put it out there, whatever happened, good, bad, or indifferent. And like I said, turns out that there really is something going on with the doll, and it happened. It continues to happen to this very day.
Now you don't, and you say these things, Anthony, and my mind goes instantly to, is it just that the people that come in contact with it are aware of the situation surrounding the doll, and they are creating these things? Much like there's been different types of experiments with like luck and things that if people are told that things are lucky and they have a belief in it and they take more chances, then they tend to be a little more lucky. And I wonder if the same thing is going on with like these haunted items, where there's so much in the public knowledge, that these things are out there. I mean, not a lot, because there's not a lot of people that know about Harold the Haunted Doll. If I said that at a party at a family event, like maybe one person there would know what the fuck I'm talking about. Otherwise, they're just going to be like, huh? What? Right. Whereas like Annabelle, because there's been a movie,
right?
More people might know about that. But don't you think that might have something to do with it?
That's a great question, and for that reason, well, when I first got the doll, I took it to a personal friend of mine at the time, who was a psychometrist. In other words, she could hold an object and tell you about the history. And she had already proven herself to me several times before I even handed her the doll. And first thing she said was, "Oh, you have Harold." And I said, "Oh, you know about Harold?" And she said, "Yeah, he's all over the internet." And my first inclination was to say, "Well, never mind. If you know about the doll, let's just forget it." But I just decided, well, let's go ahead. And I had a not a cassette recorder, but oh my gosh, I'm blanking, a digital recorder. And I was recording everything that she was saying. And she took a hold of the doll, and first thing she said was, it feels like he was either a molested child or a child molester. And then, she went on to say a few more things. The whole reading on the doll didn't last more than 90 seconds because she said, I can't do this anymore. I said, "Why not?" And she said, "Because it just threatened to kill me." And my first thought was like, oh my God, as long as I've known you, and I've known her for about 8 years, I said, I've always known you're really dramatic, but this is a little over the top, isn't it? Mm. Anyway, I took the doll back, took the recording, and I listened to it a couple of hours later. And when she held the doll and she said she felt like it was a child molester or a molested child, I literally heard what sounded like a roar, like somebody roaring. And then, she was talking about
it's interesting that you bring that up, Anthony.
Why is that?
Steve, his only Bigfoot encounter, he heard it, never saw it, only heard it.
Come on.
I was just giving him some shit.
My claim to fame is that I've heard a lot of things, but never seen anything.
What I heard on the EVP was, again, somebody roaring as soon as he said that. And then, actually, I heard a few more things because before I even handed it to her, I sprinkled it with holy water. And she laughed. She said, "You're sprinkling it with holy water?" And I said, "Yeah, better safe than sorry." And then the next thing I heard was, "Shut up, you bitch." And then
that's my kind of doll.
She was holding it, and she said, right before she said, "It just threatened to kill me. I have a heart murmur, and it's making my heart act up." Just before she said all that, I did hear an EVP very clearly saying, "I'm going to kill you, you bitch." Hmm. And that was my first inkling that there might be something going on with this. Now, to go directly to your question, I have shown the doll to a number of people without telling them anything about it. And they have had crazy reactions. And fast forwarding to 2013, somebody wrote to me on Facebook and said, look what I found. And she'd been to a yard sale, not a yard sale, like a garage sale. No, actually, it was a flea market. That's what it was. She'd been to a flea market, saw a composition doll, said, it reminds me of Harold. And I looked at it, didn't look anything like Harold. And people were saying, who's Harold? And I said, well, it's a doll that's supposedly haunted, but I don't know. I've had it in storage for the last 9 years, and that's where it sits. And people said, well, we want to see a picture of the doll. Well, I put a picture up, and immediately people had the same response to the doll's picture that people had in real life seeing the doll in person from 2004 to 2005 before I put it into storage, which amongst other things were stomach aches, headaches, backaches, things like that. And without being told anything about the doll, I just said it's supposedly haunted. But they all started reporting the same thing.
Steve, I'm starting to feel a little woozy.
Well, that's not the doll.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Put it down, Chris.
That's a dab hit I just took.
Hey, can I ask a question, Chris? Am I allowed?
Oh, Steve, you are more than welcome to ask a question.
Thank you, sir. Prior to you coming in possession of the doll, and prior to what you said, her name was Kathy.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the backstory? I mean, where did the doll come from? Where did it originate from?
Well, that I found out researching the doll for my book. I believe it was created in 1936 by a guy who was famous for making composition dolls. And he was making dolls. I don't know if you can see. Hang on one second. He's pretty big.
Yeah.
He's actually the size of a 2-year-old. And he was making dolls for wealthy patrons who wanted composition dolls for their own, for their children. And he apparently started making dolls out of, just cast off things. Because if you look, his arms are way too small for the rest of his body.
Right.
And so I believe that he just took some, parts and put them together. And then apparently, from what I was told from somebody who's an expert on these things, literally stood outside a department store and was selling them this particular one, for instance, cheap, because it wasn't a original. It wasn't a, name brand thing. And so I believe that happened around 1936 from the information she gave me. And that was in New York, which is where, again, Greg, the guy who originally sold it, found it, was in New York, not in Webster, Florida, as the listing says.
Well, that's
and he didn't buy it from some guy who tried to burn it. All that is just absolute rubbish that he mentions in his listing. And, we've talked, and he admitted to me that, he really he thought he might be able to get $7-8 for the doll. He thought if he put a great story on it, that he'd be able to get $30 or $40. Instead, he got close to $300 when he first put it up for auction.
Definitely a 1930s era doll, for sure. That's my eBay side talking there, Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know my 30s dolls,
You know your shit, Steve.
And I wanted to see what you had to say, because
Steve, if we turn this thing into a fucking a pawn store type reality YouTube show,
hey, maybe I could be the next.
You would definitely be the guy I would call in. I'd be like, no, but I got a guy. So yeah,
that guy is me.
That guy is you, Steve.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know that I'm ever going to be convinced, Anthony, of you know, the fact that this thing is changing, or causing these things that are happening to these people or whatnot. Like I said before, I wonder if it's more of a case of people are feeling these things or having these reactions based on more of a belief becoming reality type structure. Where
You know, I have no doubt that that's the case with a lot of people. But I can give you story after story. I can do that right now very quickly, you know, and just where people who don't know anything about the doll, but they all report similar experiences. For example, the second woman, which I think she was the second woman, her name is Diane, who I was trying to find somebody who was willing to do a tarot card reading on the doll. And I, at one point, literally took it to a psychic fair. And I showed it to several of the women who were there, and they all refused. And so I literally bought like a tarot card deck, and not that I believe in tarot cards, to be very honest with you, and a couple of books. And I had mentioned it to my friend Diane that I was trying to, you know, do a tarot card reading on it. She said, well, I can do a tarot card reading on it. So anyway, we sat in the conference room where she worked. It was just her and I didn't tell her anything about the doll because I didn't know anything about the doll, to be honest with you. I knew the stories Kathy told me. That was it. Anyway, while she was, you know, doing her tarot card reading, and really it just turned out to be a lot of nonsense, in my opinion. We were listening to the recording I'd made because I always made an EVP recording anytime somebody came in contact with a doll. And at one point, I saw her scratching her left hand, like right in that area between her thumb and her forefinger. And she literally said, you know, what the fuck? And then she said, Anthony, does this look like a bite to you? And my immediate thought was, I caught you. I saw what you were doing. I saw you scratching your hand. And I said, well, let me see. And she held out her hand, and there were two indentations. They weren't like anything you can just do with your fingers, like lightly brushing it. There were two indentations. And I couldn't find a ruler, but I did find a stir stick because, again, we were in a conference room. And then I found a Sharpie, a mini Sharpie, and I marked the marks on her hand, and I held it up to his teeth, which he doesn't have anymore because I've been sprinkling holy water on him for years. And they matched perfectly. Then we were telling a couple of coworkers about it. And one of the coworkers said, did somebody hit you in the eye? And she said, what are you talking about? And she said, it looks like somebody punched you in the eye. And I looked, and her right under her left eye was swelling. And I held the doll's hand up to the eye, and it matched perfectly. So anyway, make a long story short, she refused to say the doll's name. She refused to have anything to do with the doll. And one time she heard I was doing an interview on the doll, and she listened. And she called me the next day to tell me that one of the things I had mentioned was that a lot of people reported backaches, and there's a reason for that. And, you know, and then she went on to say that shortly after she had spent time with the doll, her back started hurting, and it just got progressively worse. And a year before she actually called me, or actually heard the interview, she went to see a doctor, and there was a part of her back which doesn't normally turn, rotate, or anything like that. It's pretty much fixed. That's deteriorating. And he said, you know, he can't figure out why it's deteriorating like that. And that in a couple of years, she'll be in a wheelchair. She had no idea that that was one of the things that was going on with the doll till she heard the interview like several years later.
I wonder, maybe Harold's possessed by the spirit of a chiropractor, and he's trying to drum up some business.
Could be.
Well, I'm just saying. I don't know. I'm trying to get explanations here.
Well,
he's out manipulating patients in their sleep.
I know who Harold is, who he was when he was alive, and he actually died in World War II. And I know so much about this damn doll. It's crazy. But again, the thing that, I'm not taking a bunch of isolated stories and, stringing them together.
Right.
There have been multiple stories from people who don't know each other who are all telling me the same damn thing. And, and I wasn't making these stories public until the book came out. That they're all experiencing similar things, and they're all describing the same guy, the same person, and they're all describing the same thing. In fact, I'm looking. I have some of the evidence here, but right after the Ghost Adventures episode, in which I can't really say much because, it's not my right to talk about what happened.
We know all about those things.
Yeah.
We've signed non-disclosure agreements and things, so we understand.
Yeah, there you go. Well, shortly after that happened, and the woman who contacted me hadn't seen the episode, still hasn't seen the episode, still refuses to talk about the doll. She wrote to me, and she told me on Messenger that she had a son who was 6 years old at the time. I think he was 5, just about to turn 6. And she wanted to buy a service dog for her son. And I think it cost like $25,000. The agreement she had with the people who were, putting the whole thing together was she would pay for half and they would pay for the other half for the service dog. So she was on, excuse me. He's sitting on my leg, and my leg is right now just starting to kill me. But
Harold strikes again.
Yeah, well, anyway.
Harold is fucking busy, Steve.
That's right.
What happened was she said that she was looking up how to make stuffed animals to sell to raise money for her son, when she said she somehow found herself on the quote weird side of YouTube, and she started watching a thing about Annabelle, and then on the little sidebar she saw a picture of Harold that a woman in England had made a video about him, which, by the way, has probably, I think, 250,000, 300,000 hits at this point.
Now, Anthony, have you ever thought about taking Harold to Build-A-Bear and getting him like a better outfit, and maybe cheer him up a little bit?
You might be the first guy who's ever suggested that. I've had several women suggest that.
Oh, he's not a regular guy. I'm just telling you. There's things you got to know.
Oh, are there, Steve?
But the reason why I don't is because this is how people recognize the doll. He was literally talked about on Art Bell's show when he first went up for auction. So, this is how people know that it really is Harold the doll. But going back to my story, this woman, wrote to me and said that she was watching a video about Harold. When she got interrupted, she can't remember if her husband came home or somebody came to work on the dishwasher or whatever. Anyway, she paused it and forgot all about it. Her son came home and asked if he could play Reading Apples on her Apple computer or her Apple notebook or whatever it was. She said, sure. She turned it on. A picture of Harold showed up. She said he did a double take on it, which he never does. And then he said, Mommy, there are children in the dark, and the woman wants me to help them come out into the light. And she said, what? It's just an ordinary doll. He said, no, Mommy, there's children in the dark. So anyway, she wrote to me, and I, admitted to her that people were writing to me constantly who had kids who had seen the doll, saying that there were...
Don't go into the light, Carol Ann.
There was a child in the dark. So, and I said, do me a favor, just if anything else happens, let me know. And she agreed. And a week later, she told me she had just gotten back from art therapy with her son, whom in my book I call Vincent. And he drew this. Her son asked her, her son's art therapist asked him to draw emotions. And this is what he drew, or this is what he painted. And he said, what did you just paint? And he said, this is what the doll in my mummy's notebook once. And I don't know if you can see this. It's actually, there it is. That's the right orientation. There is what looks like a sea urchin with 2 red eyes. There are 3 figures here. These 3 have gold in it, and this has black. Anyway, so he held on to it for a week, gave it to her. She took it home, put it on the kitchen table, and every time he walked by, he said, "You have to give that to Uncle Ant. Uncle Ant needs that." That's what he's called me for years now, is Uncle Ant. And anyway, right about the same time that happened, right about the same time he painted this, I was talking to another woman in Australia, and she drew a picture, or she sketched a picture of Harold. She said, "You like it?" And I said, "Yeah, actually, it's nice." She said, "Would you like to have it?" And I said, "Sure." She said, "Okay, well, I want 70 Australian dollars for it." And I literally just laughed. She was actually helping me research composition dolls at the time. And so I was mentioning to a friend of mine, Melanie, that, what happened. And Melanie is an artist. She doesn't sketch. She does things with paper. And so she said, "Well, would you like me to draw a picture of it for you?" And I said, "Sure. How much do you want for it?" She said, "I'll just give it to you." And I said, "Okay, fine." And I have it in my collection here. Anyway, so she sat down and tried to draw a picture of the doll. And she said she literally couldn't draw a picture of the doll, but what she did draw was a demon, and three kids, and then a guy, literally just a black figure. And she asked me if I wanted it, and I said, "Sure." She said, "I'll send it to you after the holidays." Anyway, so she sat down after the holidays to send it to me, and as she was putting the paper into the envelope, she saw a vision, and she created this out of the vision she saw. Now, at the same time that was going on, a guy in the Baltimore, Maryland area, and Melanie lives in New Mexico. So I've got somebody in Australia, somebody in New Mexico, and then a guy contacts me. He had seen the Ghost Adventures episode and immediately thought I'd like to do something to help Anthony. Well, he joined the Facebook group I'd created about Harold and kept thinking, I wish I could do something for Anthony. And he's an insomniac. And one night he was laying in bed trying to go to sleep, and he closed his eyes and he saw a vision of a man standing before him, sneering at him. Now he originally made a sketch, which he wasn't an artist, so he had a professional sketch artist draw what he saw. Well, he opened his eyes and there was nobody there, so he closed his eyes and this guy was still there, and he immediately tried to start saying the Lord's Prayer, and he opened his eyes, there was nobody there. He closed his eyes, and this time there were 2 more people with him. This woman and what he thought was a guy. And when he told me that story, he said that there were 2 other figures standing behind the 2 people he saw, but he couldn't make them out. Eventually what happened was that he said a large hairy arm with long fingernails, long claws is the way he described it, reached out, grabbed the 2 girls and pulled them to the side. And this guy sneered at him, almost like, mind your own business. Well, not to belabor the point, but because I could go on with stories like this, I know who these 2 women were. I have pictures of them when they were alive. I have a picture of this guy when he was alive. What was interesting was he said that this guy was burned all over his face.
He was Freddy Krueger?
Well, kind of. What I've since found out.
Did he come into people's dreams, Anthony?
what I
Well, apparently, yeah, the drawing did.
Visions.
Like I said, I do have a picture of Harold. I do know his real name. Like as I mentioned before, he died during World War II from a firebomb that exploded above his house, from the Nazis, and he burned to death.
Nazis. You know
So Harold,
I'm always on, Steve?
The Nazis? No, I hope not.
No. Indiana Jones.
Oh, yeah. So Harold was German? The original?
No, he was British.
Oh, British. Okay, you're right. You said
and ironically enough, he was very well known, very highly regarded.
Would it be somebody we would know in history?
If I mentioned his name, you could look it up.
Yeah.
And you would find all things about him. His father was even more well known and a member of British aristocracy.
Could you hold up that picture that the little boy painted?
You again? Bet.
I wanted to ask your opinion on something, Chris.
Oh.
When's the last time you seen that black thing with red eyes? Coming out of one of Matthew Johnson. No. Oh. Coming out of one of Matthew Johnson portals. And that looked like the same thing.
Fucking Zorth?
Yeah, it looks like Zorth. See, I'm being dead serious here. If Richard was still around.
It does kind of look like Zorth.
Yeah. Does this thing have a name, Anthony?
I'm sorry?
Does the black creature have a name?
He actually does.
Do you know what it is?
Yeah, I found out much later. You have to keep in mind, one of the things that Jane, as I call her in my book, told me straight off the bat when she first contacted me was the reason why she wanted to let me know what was going on was she said he is moderately to severely autistic. And at the time, he was non-communicative. Now he actually, ever since this whole thing happened with him, and I brought in the Catholic Church to help them deal with it. But he couldn't lie. He didn't have an imagination. He couldn't make things up. If he told you he saw something, it's because he could see it. At one point, she said that he was swimming, and his swimming instructor said, "Vincent, you're on fire." He screamed, jumped out of the pool, and was literally, believing he was on fire. So later on, he actually gave me, we were messaging back and forth for a period of several months while this whole thing was going on. And she said, "Who's Abaddon? Abadon?" And I said, "I don't know." And I said, "Ask Vincent to write it out and draw what he sees." And so he drew what he saw, and then he wrote Abadon. And then the next thing he wrote was, oh my gosh, it just escaped me.
I'm buying something.
If you look in the book of Revelations, there's a demon named Abaddon, Abaddon. Oh yeah, Apollyon. He wrote Apollyon. That's what it was. He wrote Apollyon right underneath it, and Apollyon is the Greek name for the same demon, means the destroyer.
So the last time we seen that black image like that, it was also described as a demon. So it's kind of interesting to me.
Well, I'll tell you,
any correlation
is that I've had people who have read my book who have autistic kids and have drawn similar things.
Hey, maybe that's what's wrong with Matthew Johnson.
Demons?
Autistic. Well, yeah.
Oh.
But he's the one who they allegedly seen a creature that was very similar to that in the flesh.
Do you think we could get like a Catholic priest to tie him down and starve him and do an exorcism?
Johnson?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
Oh.
Just tell him Zorth sent him or something. He'll be all right. That's a whole different story for a different time.
Yes,
we're distracting the guest. He has no clue what we're talking about.
No, none whatsoever. So you don't just think that these are all coincidences?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. And there's several reasons why, actually. I mean, it's apparent neither of you have read the book, and if you did, you'd see, it all comes together seamlessly.
No,
But
there's one thing you'll understand: we come completely unprepared.
no, I get it. I get it.
It's kind of on purpose. It's kind of on purpose.
Well, I understand. Yeah, I mean, at one point, somebody did an interview of me and said, "So, do you believe it's a demon?" And I said straight out, "No, I don't," simply because I don't believe in demons. And that literally stunned everybody on all the hosts, and they were like, "Oh, okay," and then they kind of dropped it. But in the meantime, while all that was happening, several things were going on. For instance, one woman, actually, she was 16 at the time in Miami, contacted me and said, one first thing she said was, "You're going to think I'm crazy, but I swear to you, I'm telling the truth." And again, this was before the book. She said, "I'd never heard of Harold. I didn't know who Harold was, but I had a dream in which I saw you in a room with Harold."
It's funny you say that, because tomorrow is Martin Luther King Day, and he also had a
dream. Good point. Anyway, so what she said was that in the dream, she saw a guy who was very angry looking standing in front of her, and she saw 5 people altogether, including the guy who was standing in front of her. And she said, 5 people? I thought there was only 4 in the doll. And then she said, "Who's the other guy?" And she said that the guy slammed the door in her face. And from behind the door, she heard a young boy's voice say, "His name is Anthony." Well, what stunned me when I received the email, I really didn't, know what to think of it. Really didn't think much about it, to be honest with you. But I'd read it like 3 or 4 times. I noticed she said that he slammed a green door in my face. And it literally...
Wait, was he at Steve's house?
Oh, yeah. Everything in my entire house is green. Just so
is it? Well, the hotel I was staying in at the time,
into you, Steve.
The hotel I was staying at the time had a green door, and Harold was sitting in the hotel room with me when she wrote to me.
That's crazy. So I see you hold that cross. Now that, I'm assuming, keeps Harold...
I'm a devout Roman Catholic. And okay. I know that from experience that both Abaddon, Apollyon, and Harold have an aversion to religious provocation.
I'll tell you, out of those 3 names, Harold's kind of, eh.
Yeah.
The other 2 got really cool names, and then
I think we ought to, Anthony. I think we ought to hype up his name a little.
Harold was the name given to him,
and you could give Harold a makeover.
Yeah, well,
and if you did it on social media, with like Instagram, as you changed him, you could almost make it like a makeover show.
Well, after years of literally pouring holy water all over him.
That's right. Now you take him to Build-A-Bear, get him a badass outfit.
Yeah, there we go. Like I said, you were the first guy, and this might be saying something about you that I didn't know. Whoever suggested that I get him, take him to
dude, I'm a fucking guy who had a daughter who wanted to go to Build-A-Bear all the fucking time when she was little.
Listen, guys, I gotta say one thing. This comes from a former cast member of the show. He's got a good suggestion. You can turn it down if you want, Anthony, but he says, Harold-Zebub.
Before we go back to Harold, because this is interesting as well.
Was that Richard?
It was Richard.
This is interesting as well. Greg, the guy who originally sold the doll, he and his brother, he actually, from what he told me, went to live with his brother for a short period of time, and his brother was running an eBay store, and he thought, well, there's a way I can make money. And the doll was already in there, and he was coming. He's actually now he's a fashion designer, he makes outfits for people out in the West Coast, and they came up with this crazy story about everything that was supposed to have happened, and he says that there's some truth in it, which is where he got a lot of the inspiration, but then it just kind of got out of hand, and they decided, it's like, well, what name should we call him? And they decided that his brother Steve would go into another room and yell out Harold, and for a supposed EVP. Well, Harold, his real name, I'm not going to give you his full name, but his real name is William. He was married to a woman named Charlotte, and he was her second husband, if I remember correctly. And they had one child.
Lived in a web.
They had one child together who lived to be about 2 years old when he died, and his name was Harold.
Some interesting stuff tonight, Steve.
Oh, I mean, it's it gets crazier and crazier and crazier. Ever since I wrote the book, it's just.
Oh, we agree. It definitely gets crazy.
Yeah.
So,
what can I ask you? What's your future plans for Harold? Are you going to retain possession of Harold, or is he going to retain possession of you?
Steve would like to buy Harold, is what he said.
I'm thinking
Harold's not for sale. Harold will never be for sale.
Steve, can you imagine if we could get Harold?
I know. I'd put him right back. Well, he wouldn't be on this show, but
what?
I have well, he would be. I'd have to put my camera on though.
Yeah.
No, Harold's not for sale. So
he's not. In all honesty, it was just recently. I went and visited the local. When I say local, I mean there's several of them. The Vicar General, who is literally the assistant to the Archbishop, and trying to get him to hear the story, because
the power of Christ compels you.
I've gone to. I knew that was coming. I've gone to several priests and talked to them about it, and once I present them with all the evidence I've obtained over the years, they literally want nothing to do with it.
But Harold ever turned to you and said, "Your mother sucks cocks in hell"?
Oh, come on now, Chris, slow down.
It's an Exorcist reference, Steve.
Oh,
I figured he got the Exorcist reference from before. He'd get that one.
Well, I went to see the Vicar General. He literally didn't even have the time of day for me. He didn't want to hear about it. But my hope
blew you off?
Yeah. After
being there for the people, right?
Recommended I go see him. So I think he was having a bad day, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, wanted to
leave Harold under his bed for a night. Maybe I'll have some time for you.
What's that?
I said leave Harold under his bed for a night. Maybe the next day he'll have some time for you.
You know what? Right. He probably would.
Be like, here, you fucking bastard.
He probably would. But just to come, like I said, he responds to religious provocation. I still have a book written about Mother Teresa, and I was keeping the book where I keep a lot of my books, in the bathroom, and I put that book on top of one of my copies of my book about Harold, and walked away and was washing my hands when all of a sudden I heard something hit the wall behind me. I turned around and the Mother Teresa book, was sitting on the floor a good 4 feet away. And how it got from the back of the toilet to the wall without me touching it, without anybody else being in there, your guess is as good as mine.
Harold likes some good dump reading material. Is that what you're saying?
What's that?
I said Harold likes some good dump reading material. Well, is that what you're saying?
I'm one of those people.
Well, as long as it ain't Mother Teresa.
I like to have I like to have reading material when I go to a bath. When I go to the bathroom,
like
any good red-blooded American. Yeah, absolutely. I was just curious if Harold did also, but maybe he was the one that moved the book.
Well, apparently he didn't like that book.
Oh.
So
Well, if you put his book, you said on top of the or below
Well, I
the
put
book.
Mother Teresa's book on top of his.
Well, there you go.
He didn't like that shit.
Yeah, well, no, he didn't. There was another time I was talking to somebody who claimed to be a demonologist. And I was just like, yeah, whatever kind of thing. That was my tone.
Steve actually is a registered demonologist.
I have no
I'm
idea. I doubt it.
Oh,
But
Steve, I thought you were. I thought you sent
No.
away in the back of a matchbook.
yeah,
It was an internet thing, but no, I
well,
never.
that makes sense.
Oh, I could have swore you did.
But
No, that was
anyway,
I did become
Oh yeah, that's
So-
right. Steve's an
this guy-
ordained minister, so maybe he can.
Are you really, Steve?
I am, but it was an internet thing. I did.
Okay.
Wait, no, I think that he could
They were
definitely.
passing them out like candy, so I took one.
Right,
What
so
are you gonna do?
dude, I think we should perform an exorcism right here on the show, Steve.
I'm not that kind of minister.
Oh.
No, I don't.
I
I don't. know how
I
to do
thought
it.
you were skilled, Steve.
I do actually know, though. I do know.
I thought you were Steve Alcorn,
Well, I
exorcist.
am. No
Oh.
exorcist, but I do know an exorcist.
You do?
I do actually.
Let's call him up.
Well, he's probably not ever going to come on this show.
Oh. Is he Amish?
How did he become a quote exorcist?
Well, he's a
An Amish
Catholic
exorcist.
priest. No, he's not Amish.
Really?
You may know of him. His name is Robin Swope.
Jeremiah,
Where does
Amish
he live?
exorcist.
He lives in Pennsylvania. Robin Swope is his name. He's been on a lot of different shows and things, but
Actually, I know somebody who met him at one point and suggested that I talk to him. And
he'd actually be a good guy for you to talk to.
I really would love to. I really would love to. See, I talked to one guy who was trained by the Vatican not to be an exorcist, but to be a quote demonologist. And again, I showed him all the evidence I have, and he said, "Well, I can tell you this." And this was after the book came out. He said, "The doll's not haunted." And I said, "Really?" He says, "No, because in a typical haunting, there's a 15 to 20 foot radius around the object that will be
That's pretty
affected."
specific.
But he said, "Your doll has been affecting people around the world, not the doll, but the entity in the doll." If you want to at some point, and I'm just throwing this out, we can do another show and I can have people that I will vouch for who will tell you the experiences they've had. And again, not only Australia, but Canada, the UK, Middle East, who, have shared experiences with me. And again, I don't just take it at face value. I want proof from them that what, they claim happened actually happened. And, they'll tell you that, like one guy made a YouTube video for me and his life just went to hell in a handbasket after that.
Oh,
Steve,
shit.
can
Is
you
that what's going to happen to us?
Steve,
What?
can you take the reins for a second?
What do you want me to do?
Just continue the interview. I have to mute.
What are you doing?
I need to use the little boy's room, Steve.
You couldn't wait. The show is almost over.
No, it's not almost over, but I mean, I the coffee's running right through me, Steve. It's rough.
I'll do my best.
I know you will, Steve.
That means we'll sit here in silence till you get back.
Especially if he brings reading material, like every other blooded American.
No, I mean, of course, we're going to be skeptical about this stuff.
Well, you know what? Like I said, I'm not asking either of you to believe me. And if I were sitting here listening, I don't know that I would believe me.
Right.
But I will tell you this. I will go to my grave, and with my last breath, I will not retract anything I've just said or anything I've ever written about the doll.
Now,
or let me just say this. If you put me in front of a firing squad and say, "You lie, you die," is everything you've ever written or talked about or said about, the doll real? I would say, "Yep, next question."
We might be able to arrange that. No, I'm just kidding. We wouldn't do that.
Yeah, no, you can hook the lie detector. Honest to goodness, I'm not. I don't expect you to believe me. I really don't.
No, and I'm not saying we don't. I'm just saying, we have been around the Bigfoot paranormal community for a long time.
Right.
And the claims, oh my God, the claims.
Oh no, I hear you.
Oh, they run the gamut.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's not just Bigfoot; it's ghosts. My personal opinion is that the media has literally beat people over the head with the whole, ghost thing. So now, I don't know if you're paying attention, but all of a sudden, everybody's a demonologist.
Yep. Right.
Because that's
everybody's got a haunted doll, Anthony.
I'm sorry.
And everybody's got a haunted doll.
Well, I know.
When you were researching your eBay stuff back in the day, how many haunted dolls were on eBay at the time?
Oh, there were a lot. Yeah, there were a lot. Which is why I didn't believe that this doll, and then Kathy, who put the doll up for sale, had a couple of interesting stories. Her husband worked for a guy whose wife was an antique doll collector, something along those lines, and asked to see the doll. And again, all these crazy stories based on the internet were, running around. So she showed her the doll. And the first thing the woman said was, he sure is ugly, isn't he? So anyway, she took the doll back, put it in a bedroom. She normally kept it out in a shed. And she put it in a bedroom closet, which is key to the story in just a couple of minutes. And then she and her husband went up to Amsterdam, where they're going there for a vacation. And
smoke some weed.
Apparently she walked out of their house, or going somewhere, walked out of the house. She slipped on some ice she didn't see and went tumbling down the stairs and died from brain injury shortly after that. Well, again, she had this doll in a bedroom closet, and one of the guy's employees, the guy decided to go back to South Africa, where he was from, after his wife died. And he had an employee who was just like, oh my God, now where do I go? And they said, well, you can come stay with us, and with Kathy and Rick. And before he did, he was apparently a real health fanatic. He loved to jog. He was, like a triathlete sort of thing. And he went to Wales, where he was originally from, and got a complete physical checkup, and they gave him a clean bill of health. He went and stayed with Kathy and was staying in the room that the doll was in. And 4 months later, he died from stage 4 larynx cancer. Nobody knows where it came from.
Yikes.
Crazy
now, things that happened in between that, because Kathy and Rick would love to go on vacations, and they, at one point, I think they were on a 3 or 4 week vacation, and every week this poor guy had to have an exterminator come in for something different. One week it was mice, another week it was an infestation of flies, that sort of thing.
Fucking plagues came to his house.
Kind of.
Jesus. Steve, this is getting biblical.
I know it is.
I don't know what we can do to contain Harold's wrath.
Well, apparently he causes problems everywhere he goes.
Well, at this point, I was able to get one of the priests I saw to give me holy salt. It's salt, regular salt that gets blessed, and I've been using that, and apparently it's calmed him down quite a bit. I don't hear as many crazy stories as I used to.
So you keep him pretty much locked away.
I do.
Do you keep him on?
I told you before, I didn't believe in demons. Okay, I do now. I will admit, I do now. And this is well into the story of Harold. I literally was walking Jane through several processes to try to figure out what was going on. And I mean, her husband would have told you, when he heard the story, when he first heard the story about Harold, his reaction was, oh, bullshit, it's just a doll. After it all went down, he couldn't believe more that this whole thing was real. especially watching his son.
Steve, see, and that's the thing. I think we need to get Steve in close proximity to the doll.
Me?
Yeah.
I don't want nothing to do with that shit.
No. I think I seriously, Steve. I think
No, I
think
have
that
no
should be
problem
the.
with that.
I think we need to make a scientific investigation, and you need to be the guinea pig. We'll put you near Harold, and if anything happens to you, I'll know to stay away.
Yeah, right. It's too late now, man. We're gonna have to review this whole show and see if we get any EVPs from it.
I'm feeling like I'm gonna die now.
If you go on to Facebook and look up Lockdown Paranormal, it's a group of cops. I don't know if they're even active anymore, but they came and did the first quote formal investigation of the doll. It was originally supposed to be a preliminary thing, and at one point they asked the doll, and I was there. They asked the doll, "Who are you?" And they have an EVP up, and if you listen closely, you can hear the response is, "None of your damn business." Almost immediately after that, when I say almost immediately, I'm talking about apparently within seconds, apparently within 60 seconds. The guy who was reviewing the evidence felt like somebody hit him across, and this guy's a cop. This guy's a genuine, bona fide police officer. Felt as though somebody had hit him across the back of his head and the middle of his back at the same time with a baseball bat. He ended up in emergency and was in there for, I guess, a couple of 3 days now. And this is when I lived in Denver. After that, they would not come within 10, 20 miles of the doll.
You said Lockdown Paranormal. Somebody asked me, is that in the one in Bristol? I don't know what that means.
They're in Colorado. I can't remember. I think they're in Arvada or someplace like that.
Okay. Just wondering.
Yeah, there's another one called Paranormal Lockdown, but they called themselves Lockdown Paranormal, but they literally refused
I'm not asking Harold anything.
What's that?
I'm not asking Harold anything. I don't want to know. You just keep him over there at your house, Anthony.
All right.
I'm not coming in. I don't believe, in a lot of this kind of stuff, but I ain't gonna tempt fate either.
Well, that's
so what you're saying, Steve, is you don't buy Anthony's story, but you don't want to be anywhere near Harold.
Harold can stay where you at.
Oh! I see how it is.
Harold can stay there.
I see how it is, motherfucker. Right. You want to sit here and act like this is all a bunch of horse shit. I know how you are, but you're like, no, I'm not tempting fate.
No, fuck no. Would you?
Of course I would.
Yeah, I know you would.
I don't give a shit.
Well, honestly, and I don't let the dog go out in public very often, but I have. I mean, one time I was in Massachusetts and I happened to stumble across somebody, and she was doing these Paranormal 101 classes, and she had seen me at a mansion that was supposedly haunted and knew, about that I had Harold. And she invited me to come to her class the next night. And I said, okay, I'll come in. I'd be happy to listen, but I'll leave the doll behind. She says, oh, no, bring it. So
And then when you got there, it was a nude sketching class, and they wanted you to stand there with the doll.
I do that on the side. There was, I think, 12, 14 people, and all of them. Well, let me put it this way. When the class was said and done, none of them wanted anything to do with Harold anymore.
Yeah, I'm about done with Harold myself. I'm kidding.
On that note, Anthony, thanks for coming on.
You're welcome. We barely scratched the surface, so let me just say there are YouTube videos on Harold. There's my book, which is...
How do we find that?
It's available on Amazon. I've heard you can order it other places. But this goes up to, this literally covers like the first third of the story. I've been literally all over the world. East Coast, West Coast, Australia, tracking the damn all down.
Did you see that fly in front of Harold? I saw an orb.
There was an orb,
did you?
Steve? I missed it.
I did.
I missed the orb, Steve.
It might have been him. It might have been the cross that he was moving.
Ah, there's the book. There's the book, Steve. Steve, we should read the book.
I've seen that book.
We should read the book, Steve.
The one day.
I think
we should.
I think we should read the book. I think we should know more about Harold the Haunted Doll.
I think so.
I think it's a moral imperative, Steve.
I think all our listeners should go out and buy that book too.
We're on a mission from God.
Well,
listen,
I don't know about God, but
Anthony,
something.
Yes,
is there a tree that we can dig up to prove that Harold is a hoax?
It's a long story. Yeah, never mind. We're not supposed to talk about the tree.
Oh. We aren't? Oh, I thought we were. But anyway, thanks for coming on, Anthony. It was a very interesting and widespread story. Like Steve said, and I want to reiterate, I don't know that either one of us will ever buy into these types of things, but it's interesting to go down these little rabbit holes.
Well, like I said, read the book.
Mm-hmm.
I've had, quote, demonologists, renowned demonologists for whatever it's worth, read the book. And, they've gone from calling me a liar to going, the most I've ever gotten out of one of them, he said, my wife and I will pray for you.
Yeah. Well, all right. On that note, this has been the Fortean Slip, episode 61, Harold the Haunted Doll. If you like this shit, hit the little thumbs up button.
God bless you both.
If you don't, hit the little thumbs down button, leave a comment, subscribe. Check out Richard's blog, The Ramblings of a Schizophrenic Brit. The link is posted below the YouTube video in the description. And check out Bigfootin' with Keith and Colin on Facebook. Check out Parabob at youtube.com/Parabreakdown. Check out Matt Knapp at youtube.com/BigfootCrossroads. As always, check out Fred Dunn, the artist for the Fortean Slip, at youtube.com/Dred Funn and DredFunn.com. We will be back next week. Topic unknown. Thank you again. It won't be Harold. Steve has had his fill of Harold, Anthony.
Yeah, that thing's staring at me.
Yeah. He's very scared of Harold right now. So, I think we've proven that although Steve is not a believer, he's not tempting fate.
Nope.
No.
Well, let me just say this. Like I said, I've got YouTube videos. I have a blog I used to maintain, but there's a couple of YouTube videos that you might find interesting. One, Harold actually makes an appearance in a mirror in a window across the way from where I was, and I call it Lord of the Flies. He actually makes an appearance in a window across the way.
I've seen that one. It's a cardboard cutout.
So, no, it's
no, that's a different.
You have to check that out.
That was 3 Men and a Baby, Steve.
3 Men and a Baby.
I'm sorry, Steve.
Aware of that goofy story.
I'm sorry. Anyway, we'll be back next week.
All right,
gentlemen. See ya.